Welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is the second of two where I am running down the greatest comebacks in Test cricket history. These are the games where one side was dead and buried, only to stage a dramatic comeback to go on to win. I have taken into account the side's strengths, the location of the games and the state of the series at the time. Here are the top 5 greatest Test comebacks of all time. Number 5, India v Australia, Kolkata, 2001. This one for me scores so highly due to the streak in which Australia found themselves at the start of the game. Possibly the greatest ever Test side, captained by Steve Waugh, had won a record 16 Tests in a row. They were dominant all over the world and this game looked like it was heading down a familiar pathway, what with the Aussies racking up a 250-run lead in the first innings and enforcing the follow-on. It looked even more of a sure bet when India was still behind after losing 4 top-order wickets. What was to follow was a partnership and comeback which will be remembered for decades. VVS Laxman and Rahul Dravid put on a stand of not far short of 400 runs to completely turn the match on its head. The pair complemented each other perfectly and Laxman went on to score a magnificent 281 against the might of Warne and McGrath. Somehow they had managed to set the Aussies an improbable task of knocking off 384 for victory. But with the talent at Australia's disposal, India knew their job was half done. After some resistance from Matthew Hayden, Harbhajan Singh completed what was some of the most memorable bowling in his career, taking 6 wickets to help India to what turned into amazingly a heavy defeat for the Australians. It was going to take something special to break their string of Test wins and that is exactly what the Indians delivered. Number 4, West Indies v Australia, Antigua, 2003. To the West Indies now and the tropical paradise of Antigua. By 2003 the might of West Indies cricket had sadly eroded, and they were faced against arguably the greatest side ever. The game started quite evenly with both sides scoring exactly 240 runs. It was in the second innings however where Australia looked like they were going to run away with the match. Openers Langer and Hayden both scored dominating centuries to put on a huge partnership for the first wicket. With Australia at 242 for 0 it seemed as if the West Indies were dead and buried. But their bowlers battled on and although the Aussies got to 417, the West Indies would have been delighted with their persistence. Even with that said, the Windies would have to break the world record for the highest fourth innings run chase. Against McGrath, Brett Lee and Stuart MacGill. In what were career-defining performances, incredibly the West Indies were guided to victory by centuries from Sarwan and Chander Paul. In terms of a run chase, this performance would be hard to beat. Number 3, Australia v Pakistan, Sydney 2010. Over to the SCG now to what was an incredible comeback staged by the Australians this time, but heartbreak for the Pakistani side. It's tough to get the best of Australia in their backyard, but that is exactly what Pakistan seemed to be doing in 2010. Thanks to some stunning bowling from Mohammad Asif, Pakistan bowled out the home side for just 127. The Pakistan batters fared a lot better and with contributions across the top order they managed a lead of 206. At 8 for 257 in the Australian second innings the game looked all but over, with them just 51 in front with 2 wickets left. Peter Siddle and Michael Hussey then went on to put on a 120-run partnership for the 9th wicket, giving him a glimmer of hope. Pakistan still only needed 176 to win but were blown away by Mitchell Johnson and Nathan Hauritz. This meant that the Australians had achieved the extremely rare feat of turning round a 200-run deficit in the first innings. The heartbreak for Pakistan was compounded by them going on to lose the series 3-0. Number 2, West Indies v Australia, Bridgetown, 1999. If it seems like I am picking on Australia, that really isn't intended. I think it may be down to a couple of reasons. Firstly, the fact they are very good. Secondly, it feels to a lot of countries that a win over Australia is the biggest achievement out there. So for my number 4 we are looking back at the epic game in Bridgetown in 1999. Whilst it is rightly remembered for the nail-biting run chase, it is easy to forget quite how far behind the Windies were in the game. Australia batted first and piled on 490 runs, thanks to 199 by Steve Waugh and a century for Ricky Ponting. When West Indies came to bat they were immediately in trouble. In fact they slipped to 98 for 6 with Jason Gillespie and Glenn McGrath laying waste to their top order. At this point they just had their tail to come and were 400 runs short of the Aussies. The fight back started with a battling 50 by their wicketkeeper, Ridley Jacobs, who was supported by a wagging tail. Still though, the Aussies took a commanding lead of 161 into the second innings. Inspired by Courtney Walsh, the West Indies bowled Australia out for 146, leaving them needing 308 to pull off a remarkable victory. What followed was one of the most exciting run chases of all time, with the great Brian Lara taking centre stage. West Indies would eventually win by just one solitary wicket, with one of the worst batsmen of all time in Courtney Walsh hanging on to support Lara. This was one of the true great moments of Test cricket, and is a worthy number 2 in terms of best comebacks of all time. Number 1, England v Australia, Headingley, 1981. Sorry Australia, but it just has to be. I promise it's not just because it is England, truly this is the greatest comeback of all time. There's layers to this comeback because it came against a backdrop of pressure on the English side. Both them had just been stripped of the captaincy and the English press had their knives out for the team. It seemed like they had with good reason as well midway through the match. The Australians had scored 400 in their first innings, thanks in part to 100 from opener John Dyson. In reply, England capitulated for 174 and surrendered a 227-run lead. Looking to twist the knife in the wound, Australia enforced the follow-on. Things went from bad to worse for England, with them being reduced to 135 for 7. They were still around 100 runs short of even making the Australians bat again with 3 wickets left. Famously, at this point the odds were 500 to 1 against England winning. What happened next was probably the biggest turnaround in sports history. Both them went on a full offensive, smashing the Aussies all around the ground. His swashbuckling innings of 149 not out at faster than a run a ball had the whole ground rocking. He was supported by Graham Dilley, who made a 50 batting at number 9. England had managed to set a target of 129, but they still needed a second miracle to make history. They got that miracle in the form of a fired-up, angry Bob Willis, who ran through the Aussies taking 8 for 43. The crowds went wild and the celebrations have gone down in English folklore. English bias aside, this epic comeback is a deserved number 1 on this list. Please let me know what you think of my list, any games which I have missed out. I would love to hear about them. As ever, thank you for watching and participating.